Hello, visionaries. This is your host, Padma Ali, and welcome to episode number 63 of the Create Your Vibrant Life podcast. So, today is another episode with a guest. And I love bringing guests, not any guest, but certain specific guests, because sometimes hearing information from them of how they have worked through their own limiting beliefs or their circumstances to get to where they are. It's so inspiring to hear that. And I know that you all are here for transforming your life. And every guest that I bring in with purpose because what they have to offer will actually shift your life if you apply some of those concepts or thoughts or whatever resonates with you. And today's guest is an amazing woman. And what I'm actually loving about doing these episodes, and especially bringing guests on, is also connecting with these people. And some of these people I know well, and some of these people I don't know really well. And today's episode, I'm bringing in Maria Calanchini, who I've only known on to the social media, and I actually discovered her through my kids because I was looking for some podcasts during this pandemic time. Instead of just using screen time sometimes as babysitting, I was wanting to find other avenues to uplift their spirit. And that's how I came across Maria Calanchini. And then I found her on Instagram. I started following her. And something energetically, like I was like, wow, this woman is really incredible. And I need to connect more with her. And so I didn't know anything about her. I went with intuition, which is one of my superpowers, and which is something I teach my clients on accessing intuition. And I connected with her and we started chatting. And here I'm bringing her to you all. And what's really incredible to me after this interview, obviously, I'm recording this intro piece after I've recorded the actual podcast, was how many similarities are there between Maria's journey and my journey, not only in the business world, but also with what has inspired her to transform her life. And it's just incredible. This again reinforces to me how much energetically we are connected with one another. We really are one. We may see ourselves as different beings. At the same time, there's such an interconnectedness with all of us. And I'm going very spiritual on all you guys, but that is the bottom line. We're connected. And if we can lean on one another to uplift that connection and grow with one another rather than all the things that are happening in the world to bring us all down, life would be so much more powerful and enriching. Anyways, that was a tangent. And I am just excited to present this interview with her. And it's so uplifting. It's so powerful. So take in whatever feels resonant for you. And please tag both of us on social media, especially on Instagram, which is where you'll find me hanging out. I'll put all the details in the show notes. So tag both of us and share your takeaways on how you're applying this to your own life, because that's where the power lies when you can apply this information into your life. So and also if you have young kids, do subscribe to Goop Tales because it is amazing. It's really fun, entertaining, and it also has amazing messages for the kids that they can take and put to use. She kind of brings in all the wisdom and the knowledge that I teach my adult clients into children's language and words that they can then start to use for their own life, like how thoughts are powerful, how the words you speak have an impact. It's really amazing. So if you haven't yet listened to Goop Tales, if you have young kids, please do subscribe and listen to it. And thank you again for being such avid listeners and participants in this life and in participating in listening to the podcast as well. So thank you so much. So without any further delay, here is Maria for all of you all.
Hello, visionaries. Welcome to Create Your Vibrant Life podcast, where you can create the life you desire by tapping into your inner wisdom. I'm your host, Padma Ali. I'm widely known in the field of psychology to create long-lasting transformation. And now I'm here to help you create the life you desire using a combination of neuropsychology and ancient healing practices. This podcast is for you, evolved, overachieving leader who's ready to unlock your highest potential. I'm here to guide you through a process of self-discovery to be the creator of your destiny. And you can do all of that by just taking aligned actions, tapping into the power of your brain, your inner wisdom, and ancient practices. So stay tuned, folks. I am so delighted you are here.
Welcome to the Create Your Vibrant Life podcast. We have an amazing guest today, Maria Calanchini. I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. Yeah. Maria, I found Maria on children's podcasts. I was looking for some podcasts for my kids, and I came across Maria's Goop Tales. And lo and behold, our whole family fell in love with it. And I literally stalked you on Instagram. Like once I found you on Instagram, I was like, all right, I'm just going to talk to you. And that's how I came to know you, Maria. And I'm so excited to have you here today. So welcome. And I can't wait to hear more about you and your story. And for all our listeners, this is the first time we're meeting. And I love this. I love this about technology today. Like it's really made the world so small. Like I would have never known you without technology. So welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And you weren't a stalker. I love the enthusiasm of your children for the stories. So I'm very excited to be here and to talk about hopefully some very inspiring subjects.
Great. So tell us about you, Maria. Like I know that Goop Tales is more like your second business. That's how you came to it. But tell us more about who you are and what is it that inspires you to do what you do.
Well, I've always had a very entrepreneurial spirit, and I honestly don't know where that came from. My dad was a doctor. I grew up in a family, very traditional family with 8 kids, and nobody else had that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And I don't know, it came from somewhere. And, I grew up back in the 70s and 80s. So I didn't have the internet, and I didn't have sort of examples of other entrepreneurs. So I went through a lot of trial and error, if you will, in my younger years, just knowing that I wasn't going to do a corporate type job, but not knowing what else was available to me. And it took a long time, like many, I'm trying to remember, I started with babysitting, of course, that kind of thing. But then through the years, tried many different things to selling things at farmers market. And it just, nothing took off, but all of those things taught me so many lessons, so many experiences that I feel like all of that added up to the ability that when it was the right time and the business that I have now. So I have 2 businesses now, but the one that's really thriving that I started 8 years ago, it took that many years of trial and error to make it take off. And I have no regrets. It took off at a way later point than I would have thought. But in my life, it was when I was in my 40s and was at this point where I had to decide what to do. Was I going to go a more traditional route? But if you're a true entrepreneur, I don't feel like you can. Like there's something in you that's always going to push against that. Yeah. And that's for many people to enter that corporate world in your 40s is not, it's usually when many people are trying to exit it. So in any case, that's when it really started taking off with Face Yoga Method, that I started a business with my sister-in-law, an online business. But up until then, I needed every bit of experience to start it. And now we started it in 2012. So 8 years later, it's accelerated and it's doing very, very well. And we have 25 people that work for us all over the world. And I have no regrets about any of the journey and where I am now, especially when I look back. If I hadn't stuck with it, I would have regretted it. And when I look at where a lot of my peers are, because now I'm at the point where a lot of my peers are so desperately that we're in the corporate world wanting to get out of it, but they've got those golden handcuffs, if you will, and they can't. And I am just so grateful that I listened to that inner voice and that intuition and went through all the hard work to make that happen.
Wow, you're talking about so many amazing things, and I want to almost dive into all of them, right? The first thing is like you said, like when you have an entrepreneurial spirit, like it's hard to do anything, and I can totally relate to that, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to that too. It's like you can't ignore that calling almost, right?
Yes.
And so, how did you work through all the trial and errors? Like, how did you stay course even when it felt like nothing was happening?
It was hard. It was really hard. I started to do some self-development work along the way because I had to get something outside of the business world that was feeding my soul and knowing like, okay, I'm listening to my intuition. And so I really started going down this path of neuroscience along the way. But there was, and I needed that to keep my mind straight, to keep redirecting me. But I mean, I remember a point where I had gotten into real estate because I wanted to do something that was going to generate income, while I was trying to follow this entrepreneurial route, but I didn't know what I was doing. And it put me in a really hard position financially. And I remember nights literally during this hard period where I would lay in bed awake at night and be so stressed out over the whole thing and think to myself, did I make a giant mistake? Did I make a mistake and that I should have gone the more traditional route, the safer route, the more secure route? And then I would always remind myself, and I did have those thoughts. And then I would remind myself that there was no security in that route anyways. And, I really think that that's a myth that more of us used to believe. It's changing a little bit now. But then, I would remind myself of that. But it is not easy. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. But I have to say that you can't give up. Like I would seek out any entrepreneur I could find. I would go to these groups or, networking groups, and I would talk to people. And the minute I found somebody that I felt was doing their own thing, I would just talk to them. And it was almost like I was taking just a little bit of their energy or their inspiration to keep me going. And I would be like, if they can do it, I can do it. Because that's how I found my inspiration. It wasn't easy at all. And I was talking about this, those nights when I used to be afraid in the middle of the night. And I was talking about this recently with one of my sisters. And I was saying, I used to think about everybody else and like, why couldn't I be normal like them and have a normal job like them? And her husband's in a job that he does not really appreciate, let's just say it's in it, and he would very much like not to be in that. And she was like, oh my gosh, she's like, you made the right decision. She's like, just talk to my, because now he's got a family and it's the golden handcuffs and the whole 9 yards. And at this stage, I am so glad I stuck with it. But yeah, not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. And people always think about, one of the reasons why people become entrepreneurs is freedom. But it's almost like the freedom comes later. It doesn't come in the beginning, and you stuck with it. And it's all about like, just how can you stay the course, even when it's down, like when it's not, you can't see the results. And yeah. I know you said you did some personal development, and you also did some, you're focusing on neuroscience, like really working with that to help you get through the down periods. Is there anything specific that helped you keep your level of thinking or like being your mindset in a different place?
There is. So what during one of my dark nights, like I remember literally the next day I woke up and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I need to get different results in my life. And I think so many people, including myself at one point, the results were always coming from spinning my actions, right? Just acting. And I finally realized, well, it's like the hamster on the wheel. I'm getting these same results. It's not just about hard work, right? Something needs to change. So it dawned on me that it was my thoughts that needed to change, the way I was thinking about things. So I literally Googled how to think differently, because I only knew how to think how I knew how to think, right? I mean, that's how I was thinking. So I had to get outside of myself. So I Googled that. And that's what sent me down the path of neuroscience. And in particular, I found Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I don't know if you're familiar with him. So was talking about the neuroscience of the brain and the way the neuroplasticity and how we can change the way our brain, we're not hardwired, but it takes a certain concerted effort to start to change that. So I started reading all his books, and I've been to 3 or 4 of his retreats now. I've seen him in person, and everything just clicked and fell into place with him. And now he's all over, I started following him back probably over 10 years ago, and now he's just blown up. And as well he should. And I'm thrilled because more and more people are finding that work. And I just want to say, for anybody that's listening, there's so many limitless possibilities out there. But you got to start with, from inside of you with your thoughts. It's not about just acting.
Wow, you just nailed it. That's primarily the work I do. Now I know why we connected,
Exactly.
It's like that inner vibration, something about your energy was I need to connect with Maria. It was just such a strong pull. Now I know, because there's a certain vibration, and exactly what you said, it has to happen from inside first before you can make the changes outside. And I love Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's just so amazing. Is there a favorite book you have of his that really connected with you?
I like The Placebo Effect because I think it's more digestible. The very first one I read of his, which is great, it's I can't remember the exact title, but it was how to lose your mind and get a new one. Something along those lines. It was the first one I read, and it was very kind of science driven and deep and a bit heady, but it was great. And I would recommend it to friends, and they're like, oh yeah, this is a lot. I can't digest this. And then he came out with You're the Placebo for exactly that reason. So it was more easily accessible and readable.
Yeah. I love all those books. And yeah, that's a great one to start with.
Yes.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. So how did you start face yoga?
So my sister-in-law, Fumiko, she's married to my brother. And when I first met her, which was about 15 years ago, she was doing face yoga in Japan. She's Japanese, and she was well known for it. She'd written a couple books in the Asian market, and she was teaching it over there. And then a bunch of TV shows picked her up, and they were using her kind of as a gimmick, because they would have her come on the shows and make funny faces. But I met her through my brother, and I don't even know why. I try to think back. And once again, I think this is when you put something out intentionally or energetically. When I first met her, I said, we need to bring what you're doing, to the rest of the world, not just the Asian market, not just Japan. And at that point, that was before I had really started learning online marketing. This was, I think, back in 2008. Or even before. And so we kind of talked about it. We went through this little journey, and we did a couple focus groups here, and we were going to sell devices for the face. And it didn't work out at that point. She had a lot of obligations in Japan. And it was hard. That was another really hard thing, because I was banking on us doing this thing together. And then she told me, she's like, I can't right now. I just have too many obligations, and I want to start a family. She had a daughter. And so I was disappointed, and I had to shift. And so I shifted, and I started working. This was in 2008 in online marketing, before there was even Instagram. I started learning all this online marketing, YouTube and Twitter and search engine optimization. And I ended up consulting in that for 5 years. And then she came back to me 5 years later. I think it was 4.5, 5 years. She came back to me 4.5, 5 years later and said, okay, I'm ready. And at that point, I had this 5 years of experience, and I had a whole new perception of what we could do with our business, how we could do this online learning platform, which I had no idea 4 years earlier that it could look like this. And that's when you have to go with the flow of the universe, which I did. I didn't have a choice, right? She said no. And then 4 years later, she came to me for a reason. She did not know when she came to me 4 years later that I was going to have this whole new view of it, but I did. And then we started it in 2012 with an ebook, and I would stay up till midnight making the website. I had no idea. I would look on YouTube videos. As long as you help yourself, I feel like the universe always rises to meet you. I would look up YouTube videos on how to make a website. It was a terrible website, but it was something. And now, 8 years later, we have 25 people that work for us that are all over the world. And I don't make websites and do social media anymore. But I could not have known that at the time. I just had to know to keep taking those steps.
It's amazing, right? It's amazing. First of all, you didn't give up. You kept doing something and then who knew that knowledge was what was needed?
Exactly. And that's what I always say, as long as you're making that effort with the intention, which I know you do, and that you're very cognizant of, and you're listening to that inner voice, that the universe will rise to meet you, but it's never in the way you think it's going to be. We all have this path, right? This path in our head of we're going to do this, this, and this, and get this. It is never going to be like that, ever. But you can't get so frustrated. I understand there's frustrations, but you can't give up, and you have to know that there's something better in store.
Wow. You're dropping bombs everywhere. It's really incredible. What you're talking about is surrendering. You're talking about just staying the course and trusting your intuition of why you wanted to do something in the first place, and just being knowing that this is going to work out, and also letting go of control.
Yeah.
Huge, right?
How it's always, we want our mind. And this is what I learned from Dr. Joe, our mind it's programmed to figure out how. It wants control. And so I had to tell myself, I'm okay, that's just your mind that needs to know. You're not actually going to know, and to just go with what was in front of me.
Wow. That's incredible. Just that in itself, right? You letting go of the how is half the struggle.
Yes.
Just take what I'm hearing from you is you just took 1 foot, you put 1 foot in front of the other, kept doing it, kept doing it till the gates opened. It's almost like everything led up to that point.
Yes. But I would hold the big vision. You know how sometimes you have a big vision for something, but I didn't need to know the exact steps that were going to get me there.
Right.
And it's still to this day in the business, it's evolved now. I did not want a bunch of people working for us because I did not want to manage all these people. And if you had told me then 25 people are going to work for you and it continues to grow, I would have panicked about that because I wanted to make us not geo independent, so we didn't have to be anywhere, and virtual, which we are. And I didn't know how that could happen employing all those people, because once again, I just said the how. I need, my mind needed to know how, but it's so much better than I could have even thought up. And I don't actually have to manage those people because of the way that we're structured, and we're still independent and we're still virtual.
It's amazing. It's really amazing. And what really strikes me also is you just kept the course. You held that vision and you kept the course, knowing it'll come together at some point. How, you didn't know, but it would come together. There's that knowing. And I just love that. And you're right. You didn't expect to have 25 people working for you, but that's what's happening. And you're all right, I'm going with the flow again. You're not resisting.
Yeah. Because it feels good and it feels right. I'm not saying there's not little stumbling blocks along the way, but overall, it's listening to that intuition, like you said, has been so amazing for me because I'm a part of, or I have been a part in the past, and not as much now, but of many different entrepreneurial groups. And so I'm very familiar with the struggles of entrepreneurs. And, the two big ones that seem to always come up are employees. That's probably the number one issues that they have with their employees. And the second one is cash flow. And, knock on wood, I could never relate to either one of those issues when I would talk to the people. And I was okay with I was like, I'm not going to buy into their narrative. And I'm not saying their narrative wasn't true or real. It was for them. And it still is for many of them. But I just knew in my head that there was another possibility where it's much more in flow, it's in sync. And I would just always hold on to that vision. And that's exactly what happened.
Amazing. And you're again bringing up something so valuable that oftentimes when we look at successful entrepreneurs, it almost feels like an overnight success, but it isn't. It's like all the, like you said, stumbling blocks and like things that you had to work through, like all that years of sowing the seed in the soil, nurturing the soil, knowing it's going to sprout one day, right? And it's amazing to see that journey.
And that's so true. And it seems like so many people that you watch in the media or on TV or on Shark Tank. Well, on Shark Tank, it is a little bit of it's not an overnight success, but it's an instant, publicity fest. But it seems like that. And in this age where it seems like every 20 something wants to build an app and sell it for multi-millions, and it's really 2 out of how many hundreds of millions that actually happens for. It does seem like that. And that's, there is no overnight success. And I always look at, sustainability. And that's how I look at growing our business, because in fact, Shark Tank did ask us to be on. And they asked us a couple times and we said no. I specifically said no because, we didn't need them. And I wasn't going to give up equity in the business. That's basically why. The publicity would have been nice. But if you had asked me when we first started our business 8 years ago, Shark Tank had come knocking, I probably would have said yes, and it would not have been good. It would not have gotten us to where we are today, which I'm so grateful for. So it is that consistency and the sustainability instead of that. I always think I want long-term sustainability instead of that shot in the arm for cash infusion, which I think, and I've been there before, I've been through that thought process. I've done that before. And I think for any entrepreneurs listening, I get it. Like, it's so common. You're like, I need this cash. I'm going to do this thing, even though it feels against your inner instinct to do it. I really try, that's how you learn, from trial and error. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it requires courage, and it requires being in integrity with what your values are. And like, you honored all of that. Because, like saying no to Shark Tank is like a big deal. Like, there's a reason you said no. And not many people would have said no, right? And so like that is real, that speaks so much to the values you subscribe to. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would not have had those had I not had that, I think they came to us like 2 years ago, that 6 years in the business growing and flourishing at that point. And I got so much, I was telling you earlier, so much of I didn't have a mentor. Like I said, like I spoke when I was younger, I didn't have a mentor. And so when it got to the point when the internet became more prevalent as I got older, that was my mentor. It was going on, watching YouTube videos, finding people like Dr. Joe, looking at business people that I respected, and just hearing their stories over and over and over again. So I always say that whatever it is that you want to do, you don't have the excuse now of saying the information's not available, because it is there.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? The everything you want, it's available now.
Everything. You can get a college education, probably better, on YouTube.
So true. So true. And that brings me to what I've been dying to talk to you about, which is Goop Tales.
Yes.
Oh, what inspired you to create Goop Tales?
So Goop Tales, this will be another long journey story one day. So the Goops come from a book, an original book that was written in 1904. that my mom had read as a child. And so she then gave them to us and we would read them. And the Goops are just these funny characters named after the naughty habits of children. And of course, I come from a big family with 8 children. And so we would call each other, you're Never Share, you're Gablia, we would inhabit these Goops. And as I got older, I kind of forgot about them. And then I was working in a business, in a liquidation business where we would take product from a bunch of different big companies and we would liquidate it. And we ended up doing this whole fashion side of it and having this store in fashion. And I try to remember what happened, but just like one day, the Goops, the images of them, because I loved them so much, they popped into my head. And I was like, I want to put these Goops, they almost look, I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, because you know what they look like. For me, they almost looked a little bit like Japanese anime, just like the simple line drawings.
Yes.
And so I was like, I'm going to put them on a t-shirt, even though no one knew who they were, right? Because not everybody had read the Goops. So I put them on these t-shirts because I was working in fashion at the time. And I put the Goop on the front and their little poem on the back. And it was just an idea that I had, and I started selling them at street fairs in San Francisco, near where I live. And so I would go to these street fairs and I'd have all these t-shirts with the Goops on it and then some other t-shirts with designs. And people would be drawn to the Goops and they would ask me, they're like, well, what's this? And so then I would have to tell them the whole story and show them the little book and everything. And it was that experience. So I did that for probably 2 years during the street fair, era. And so I did that, and it kind of put this thought in my head, because I thought, well, people are drawn to these, but they don't know what they are and they need to hear the story. So then I thought, well, you have to write stories about them. Like that was my thought, that I had to write stories about them. And I had no background in writing or anything like that. But I decided they needed to know a story. And the original Goops didn't have much stories written around them. They were just poems. So I just started making stuff up and I started writing these little stories. And then that kind of got a little bit, I'm trying to remember how long, that was many years ago. And I felt like the stories, I was going to do a book at the time. And it was over 10 years ago, when it was before the internet had what it has today. So I shelved it. I shelved it for a while because I didn't know what to do with it. And then a couple years later, I was looking at photos on the internet because I love to travel. And I would see these just amazing photos of incredible places all around the world, just really, really beautiful. And they inspired me so much. And then all of a sudden it just clicked that, oh, you should connect the Goops that you started to write a couple of years ago with these photos and somehow incorporate them. And so that's what I started doing, was writing these stories connected to the photos, not knowing what was really going to happen with that, but just writing them. And then, I was always listening to business podcasts at the time. And this is before podcasting is as prevalent as it was now. But then I got the idea that a podcast, I was like, well, that's how I can put it out. So then I think I told you 4 years ago, I started putting out the podcast. And I still didn't, it's now that I look at where it is today, this is going to sound like a very long journey of the Goops, because it is. It started like probably 15 years ago for me, when I was like selling the t-shirts, to then starting to write the stories, to then shelving them, writing them now. And I was doing other things, of course, doing my other business and the rest of my life in the meantime. But I could not give up on that voice of the Goops. I could not. It was like always inside me. And I always knew I'm going to come back to it, and I'm always going to do it. And so now it's a podcast. It's a full-fledged podcast with regular episodes coming out, and we're moving forward very well. And we have a book that we're working on. And
I'm very excited about the book coming out. My kids are going to be all over it. So, what is really striking to me, Maria, is that the inspirations come for you. And even if you have to table it for some time, like years at this point for Goops, there's a part of you that allowed that inspiration to take form. It's
Yes.
really amazing. It's really amazing. Like this, that speaks to so much of how you live your life. Like it's like, okay, the inspiration came. I may have to table it, even with the face yoga, right? You table it, but you just let it come back. It's so inspiring.
No, thank you. You know why I think I would say I'd let that come back is because it was a true, authentic inner voice calling, as opposed to a calling just to make money. Which, believe me, I've gone down that path before, in difficult positions, and those are not sustainable. They're not sustainable, and they won't keep you there. But this one was like, I just could not let it go, and it's not been easy in the sense that it's never, it didn't immediately take off. I didn't immediately know what the path for it was going to be. And at this point, as we talked about earlier, I just surrender because I still don't know where the goops are going to take me, but I know it's going to be somewhere amazing. And what I care about more than anything with them, and this is what I told myself when I first started putting out the stories, because I'm not a writer by training or anything. All I cared about was that the children, the main audience who listened to them, liked them and appreciated them. That was all I cared about. And that's still, and clearly from what I'm hearing from your kids and many others, that's what's resonating with them. And so I will keep following that path as long as it resonates with the audience.
Wow, I am so inspired and blown away like by your act of service. It's truly an act of service because writing those scripts and doing that podcast, I know takes so much work. It's a lot of work. And what is, for all you listeners, like if you haven't heard of Goop Tales, if you have kids, please go listen to Goop Tales. It is incredible, incredible. And how I came across, I think I was telling you this, Maria, like during COVID times, I was like, I can't put them in front of TV anymore. Like this is crazy. So we started looking for podcasts, and that's how I came across. And by that time, obviously, you had so many episodes. So we literally binge heard so many of these episodes. And it's inspired my kids to want to travel more. And they know each group. And what I love is the storyline, like where the struggle, but then also how they overcome that. And there's always an act of service too, if you the theme, right? Like each group is like an act of service helping someone else. And my kids are so inspired. As probably you can hear me, like I mean, blah 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 about the Goop Tales. I'll tell anyone about Goop Tales. It's so amazing. It's really incredible. So whatever you're doing is having an impact.
Thank you. Yeah, and I really feel that if it's having that impact, it's because it's coming from a place higher than myself, bigger than myself. Like I had someone ask me last night because the 86th story is coming out this weekend. And she was asking me, are you worried about running out of ideas? Or, how do you keep getting inspired? And we were sitting at a restaurant and there was this big, beautiful, sparkly chandelier above us. And I looked up at it and I said, no, I'm not worried about that. I said, I could write a whole story about what happens in that chandelier. And she was like, wow. And I said, because I don't worry about the creativity and where it comes from, as long as I know I'm tapped into an authentic place, because it's when I get in my mind and I try to figure it out, that's when everything stops.
Yes. And the stories are incredibly inspiring. We were just at the Grand Canyon, I think I was telling you, and they were so excited. They made me put that podcast on. I mean, we've gone through hours of car rides with Goop Tales. We listen to it almost pretty much every evening. Now that it's on YouTube, my son is like, figured it out.
Oh, okay. So I was a little bit, but he's watching it on YouTube and he likes to see the images.
Oh, he loves it. Oh my God. Like I have to like literally tear him away from like, he figured on his own. Now that, with online schooling, yes, they figured out how to use computers much more than savvier than probably I am. And he figured out, he's like, Mama, did you know Goop Tales is on YouTube now? And I'm like, what?
I was a little worried about that because the whole goal is to get children into their imagination and off the screen. But at the same time, since, as you know, I integrate real places around the world because I want to inspire learning about new cultures, new countries, the things that are foreign to them. I use those photos, those real places inspire me. So, if it's, some beautiful Italian countryside to somewhere in Jerusalem, whatever it is, or a crazy animal in Africa, those are all part of the story. So I thought, well, they might go to the screen to look at the pictures anyways. So why not combine them together? So I did kind of do that crossover. So I'm glad you're okay with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's fine at this day and age. They need, it's totally fine. And plus it reaches a wider audience too. You never know who's going to be listening to it. Yeah. And it's really incredible. And how do you come up with the ideas for the groups?
Well, the actual goop names now, as you know, there were an original 52. So I wrote the original 52. And I had said in the podcast when I got towards the end of 52, I said, don't worry, kids. I will not stop making goop tales. What I'll do is I will start combining the existing goops and they'll go on these crazy adventures together. And instead, what happened is, I can't even remember how once again, this is what the universe gives you. Because I don't think this was my idea. I'm pretty sure that this was the listeners' idea. All of a sudden, these kids started writing in these ideas and they said, I want a goop named this. I want a goop named Know-It-All. I want a goop named Lazy Pants. I want a goop. And I thought, okay, then, because then they're co-creators with me. And now we're on 86, so what is that, like 34 past the original 52? And I've probably got 200 more goop names sent in by children that want me to write a story around their original name. And they come up with great names. And then now they're telling me, I want my goop, to go to the Nile River. I want my goop to, go to this planet or be inside this flower. And I love it. So they're co-creating. And so they give me now at this point the idea. So then I have to take their goop name, find a beautiful spot, and to start the, in it now, back to answer your question, I'm giving you a long-winded answer, to get the inspiration for the story. I know where the goop is going and I know what his habit is. So I literally start looking at photos of that place. And I will just look at photos and photos and photos. And the photos inform me. They're, real photos of animals or of a geographical location. And they inform me of what's going to happen and in my imagination. And then I consider it storytelling. Like people that have kids, I don't know if you've ever story told as opposed to story read, like you're just making something up for your child to entertain them. And you kind of look at what's around you for inspiration. And that's what I do with the goops. And then I just go right into my head and I imagine them having this adventure. It's like I'm them and the conversations I would have.
Yeah, it's the interactive part of it, like pulls them in. Anish gave his group name Playalina, and like he was so excited. I was so impressed that you did the Italian accent so well. I was like, are you Italian?
Oh my God.
You were so good at that. I was like, oh my God, like you are incredible. Like, I don't know how you were doing that.
Oh, well, I'm sure there's some accents where people are like, what is she doing? Because that, I have to say, I'm glad you brought that up. That is one of the most challenging parts. Sometimes when I'm writing the story, I think to myself, I'm going to have to voice this baboon. I'm like, what am I going to do for his voice? And to try to make it sound different. Like I literally, when I was first writing them, I kind of held back from a lot of animal conversation, if you will, because I was scared to voice this animal or a snake or something. And then I got over that because it's not very interesting to stay stuck in your fears. And I got over it. And now I just do it. And I realize I'm like, oh God, there's probably someone in Ireland cringing at my Irish accent, but that's okay. I'm like, it's okay just to put it out there. And so now I just go for it and I just do it. But I'm actually going to start. I found an online class from voiceover actors to teach you different characters just for fun, to try to make it better. I'm going to start doing that. But,
I love that spirit of yours to keep learning, right? Like that is another piece of entrepreneurial spirit, which is like keep learning. There's so much to learn.
Right? We're never done.
Oh my, I love what you said. Fear is not interesting. I love that. I'm going to use that quote. Like it's amazing. I'll quote you.
No, it's not. It's not. It keeps you absolutely stuck.
It does.
And my head literally turns into chemical spirals when I'm in fear, right? And if it's doing that, I can't move forward.
Yeah. It's so true. But I loved how you said it. It's like fear is not interesting. I love it. Love it. I'm going to quote
What's
you.
on the other side of fear is what's very interesting.
It is.
You know?
It's so true. I mean, like you're creating such an impact on these children, and they are the most important piece of our society, right? And so this is great.
Yes. And that's my goal is as I want them to know about the world around them, whether or not they have the ability to travel or the opportunity, they can still engage in it in their imagination.
Yeah. Yeah. My God, I can talk to you for hours. So I'm, as we wrap things up, I'm curious if you have any words of wisdom for someone who is an entrepreneur, who wants to be an entrepreneur. Like if there's anything that you can tell them.
What I would say, harking back to earlier, is if you really have that voice, don't give up. Only you know that voice. There are so many people and friends and family that would always look at me in my journey, and it looked really wacky and unstable to them. But I had to stay true to my voice. Don't try to argue for their limitations to them. Just stick to your own inner voice, and just know that the path is never going to turn out how you think it's going to turn out, but stay with that voice and keep trying things, and the universe will show you something. I went through many different, ideas before I came to the idea that really took off, but I never stopped trying, and it was never how I thought it was going to be. It's a million times better.
Oh my God, I love it. It is. It's always a million times better.
Yeah, it is. It really is. But you have to stick to that path and whatever it is you need to spiritually, mentally nourish yourself along the way. That's super important.
Yeah.
It's super important. And chasing the money too. I mean, it's true what they say, chasing the money is not the way to make the money. What you chase runs from you.
You're like dropping truth bombs everywhere. It is so true. We chase money runs away from you, and so true. Wow. I love this, Maria. I'm so grateful for your time and all that you do in the world. And it's so inspiring. And I know this is anyone who's listening is going to really benefit from your wisdom of this journey. And I love how you've stayed course. And
thank
I
you.
hope I hope you have many, 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 many more episodes, very selfishly.
There's one coming out very soon.
Oh, we wait for it.
It's coming Sunday. You can tell.
Yeah, I love it. And I also love that now that you're doing the behind the scenes. It's really fascinating. Love it.
Okay, good. No, I like hearing that because I didn't know how that's going over and not going over. Sometimes, my audience, as you know, is young children. And young children, fortunately, are not on social media or the internet very much. So sometimes it's like, I wonder what they think. I don't know. Because they're not going to give you the kind of feedback. They just want to throw out their ideas, which is what I love about them.
Yeah. And I'm going to include in the show notes Goop Tales and how people can find you and on Instagram and your email and everything. So thank you. Thank you for your, and and the book coming out. I can't wait for that. Yes. So how will they find out about the book, Maria?
So the book is, we're going to be doing a Kickstarter this summer, probably June or July of 21. And we're working on it right now. It's a fully illustrated book of the first 5 Goop Tales, because there's 85 right now, and we cannot put them all in one book. So we're going to do it by volumes. And if you go to gooptales.com, I believe it's gooptales.com/book, and you make sure you get on our mailing list, then we will let you know when the book comes out, and I'll be talking about it on the podcast too. And it's a beautiful book, completely custom illustrations that we're working with a great illustrator right now on doing it.
Amazing. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I have to get 2 of them because they will be fighting if I get just one. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom.
Yeah, thank you. This was so fun talking to you. I like, you have such good energy, and it just helps inspire me to open up, and you bring up really good points.
Oh, thank you, Maria. Thank you. I think I tell you, like, sometimes you just don't know. I was like, I want to connect with her. Like, that's all I knew.
And you followed that. And then look, we are. That's it. You just listened and followed that voice like we were talking about.
Yes. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening. I have a request for you. If you found value, chances are that your friends and family will too. So if you can leave a positive review on iTunes, it will help reach so many more people. And if you have any topics or questions you would like me to feature, please send them to support@padmaali.com. And lastly, please share your takeaways and breakthroughs with me on Instagram @Padma Ali. Thank you so much for tuning in.